So, if you've been listening and watching some of my battle reports, you would know that I like to theme an army. I like to pick a sort of a little battle and try and build an army to fit it. And the impetus for this one was an article by Maurice Tiefenbrunner, and it was The Long Journey Home. And he was a German Jew who escaped from Nazi Germany and made his way to Palestine, and then joined the British Army in the Engineers, and then got posted to France, evacuated at Dunkirk, and joined the Commandos. He then went to the Middle East with the Commandos and ended up at the Battle of Keren fighting the Italians. And he gives an account of fighting with the Commonwealth troops of a South African unit and a Gurkha unit. And he was wounded in that action, and he then went on to be with the SAS and the Special Interrogation Group. So he had quite a varied career before he was captured on a long-range mission and saw out the war in a POW camp, and died probably about 4 years ago. So this army was based on it. So it's an East African army based for Keren. Now, when you look at the East Africa unit information in the booklet, the British Army or in the Western Desert, you don't get the troops that were really involved. So what do you do and where do you go? So let's have a look at what I've got here, and I'll then have a talk through. So for the Warlord GT, I'm taking one platoon. Let's go out. So we've got over here our vehicles and our infantry and our artillery. So it's a single rifle platoon. For the Warlord GT, you can take 2 rifle platoons, or a rifle platoon and tank platoon, or 2 tank platoons. It's 1,000 points, but I'm going for this one. So what have we got? So we've got our officer and his Batman. We've got our free air observer. We've got a unit of commandos. I've got my sergeant wearing a kilt. I've got my light artillery, 25 pounder and spotter, and a unit of 8 Gurkhas. You can just about see the knives that I've modelled on them. And then we've got 2 units of 8 infantry, and they've got rifles and a light machine gun. They're early war infantry, so can't really take very much with them. I've got an anti-tank rifle. I've got a Lanchester armoured car. It should be a Marmon Harrington, but they're the same configurations, same stats, but same price even. But I can't get the Marmon Harrington Mark model that I want, so I've had to go for the Lanchester. I've got a recce carrier. Not a recce carrier, this is a universal carrier to carry the troops. And I've got a truck. It won't have a machine gun on it. And then I've got my Matilda. So that's the army. There's 1 unit missing, which is a sniper team, and I'm building that up at the moment. So that's what I have. So where do you get your army build out? Well, what I did was I looked at the Keren list, and I looked at what Maurice Tiefenbrunner said, and then looked to the books to see where I could go. Operation Lightfoot gives me close-ish to what I wanted, but obviously that wasn't East Africa. So the units that I got and selected were all sort of East African in their deployment, and built it up this way. So it's a generic platoon running with it is. So the only veterans that I've got are the Commandos and the Gurkhas. Officer is a veteran, and everything else is regular, apart from the Bren carrier, which is veteran, and the truck, which is veteran. It's the Commando unit, 5-man unit, will fit in the Bren carrier, and the 8-man Indian unit, Gurkha unit, will fit in the truck if I want to do outflanking or bring them on reserve in a quick way. So that's the army. So looking at what I could take, how I could field it, back into Google and looked at the Battle of Keren, looked at the battle ops for Keren and the units that were there, and at the Battle of Keren it was the 4th and 5th Indian infantry divisions. So I've gone with the 5th Indian division, and they were called the Ball of Fire. So for their markings I've put together the red ball on the black square, and that was their divisional markings. So that was what I went for. So try to theme it all in. Now, will I be underpowered? And this is where we come into theme and cheese. And will I be underpowered? So let's take a little stop at this one. I'll take a picture and then we'll go on to talk about theme and cheese. So, theme or cheese? That's the question. Or themed cheese in some instances. What do we mean by cheese? Well, it's probably what people would think is a horrible unit in the game that they don't like, that they don't want to face, and they feel that the use of it in a game is too much. And that there are units in bolt action which are very destructive if they hit. So, what are we looking at? What are we talking about? Normally, we're looking at heavy howitzers. And the ability to take multiples of heavy howitzers and heavy rockets, so your Nebelwerfer, your Katushkas, if that's the way you pronounce them. So it's the format of the event which can really gear the player towards what they take. So it might not only just be the heavy howitzers, it could be a number of tanks. So certainly for the British roll call events that we go to, you can take 2 tank platoons, or you can take 1 tank platoon and an infantry platoon. So let's have a look. If we take the 2 tank platoons, we could fit in, as somebody did last year, 6 Stuart M3s. So the M3, I'm looking around if I've got some garlic and a steak, because and we're talking a wooden steak, because people don't like it. They don't like that tank. And why don't they like it? Well, they will say historically it never had all those guns used in the battles. And how many guns has it got? Well, let's have a look. Stuart M3, and I'll stick a picture up of one because I've got a couple, surprisingly enough. What are they then? So we've got a light anti-tank gun on a light tank. They're vulnerable at the sides, so they're 8 armour. So you can have a coaxial machine gun, so that only fires if the main gun doesn't fire. It then can have a hull machine gun, so that's fine. But it can then have, and this was altered in the FAQ in February, 2 light machine guns which are like sponsons fitted on the front. But on that you can only shoot them at the target that your hull machine guns are firing at. So you can have 2 of those. But you can also fit, if you wanted to fire it, this is a tricky bit because I think it's the same person who would be firing the coaxial machine gun who would be firing the pintle mounted machine gun. So you can have a pintle mounted machine gun. So we're looking at 23 shots coming from 1 tank. So if you multiply that up, and you can have a 2 platoons of 6 of these. So very heavy anti-infantry they could be. And of course you've got the 6 light anti-tank guns coming at you. So you could run it that way. So we're only looking at 150 points. So 450 points, 900 points. So you won't normally see them in 1,000 points. The roll call competition is 1250, so it gives you that extra numbers to fit in your infantry that you might need to take objectives. So is that over the top? Is that cheese? Well, yes, if you're taking inexperienced infantry with no anti-tank and everything like that, they are going to get shot and killed. So you've got to think, what is the event I'm going to? What is going to be in it? what might I face, and how am I going to have fun, be competitive, but take what I really want. And that's the sort of conundrum that I'm in with the Warlord GT. So I obviously want to take the East African list. 1,000 points, 1 reinforced platoon. So that's not bad. That's pretty good as it goes. I quite like the army. I've used it. Mixed success. I've won some, lost some, drawn a few. So it's working okay. However, is it going to stand up to 2 platoons, which is a mix of tank and infantry? That's the question. So my thought process is, do I ditch the East African and go North African? So North African, I can then use the Operation Lightfoot much more to my advantage. So with that, I could have the same infantry that I've got, more or less, and throw in 2 Stuart M3s. Because they were in the desert, I've got them painted up, and I wouldn't be having the 23 shots from them because I don't really want the pintle mounted machine gun. And here we go as your knotty conundrum, because the British didn't use the Sponson light machine guns, or the medium machine guns that were in the Sponsons, because it was too cluttered. It got in the way. They didn't work properly. As you're trying to drive, the driver's trying to drive and he's trying to shoot with the machine gun. It doesn't work. So, and they were quickly dropped from the US list. So they were probably out of the way and not being used by 1940. I would hazard a guess. So that's the problem. You can take it in the list. They work quite well, but actually in history they probably weren't used. So this is where the dilemma, and I think this is where it then comes down to cheese, is that are you trying to be historical? And if you're going to be historical, you don't want to take the 2 LMGs. But in the game, it's there. So you've got these 2 little people sitting on your shoulder. One saying, yeah, go for it, it's great. And the other one saying, well, you don't really want to do that, because that's not right. So you've got to think, what am I going to be facing? What are the other people going to be doing? What do I want to get out of it? In the US, slightly different, because in their games and in their tournaments, you not only have perhaps best general, but you have best themed and best painted, and you get a composite score, and that all comes in to work out who the best general is. Again, it's all subjective again about what is cheese, as we would say, what isn't cheese, what's themed. Because you could have a really, really tough list themed to a year, and that's themed. As far as we see, that's themed. Yep, it works. These were here, that's what it was, this is what the army list was, and it's themed. But it's what other people would perceive as over the top. So what can we do? You're in a rock and a hard place, really. So me, I like to have fun. I like to be fairly competitive. I'm not overly over the top, but I like to have some history and some theme to my list, and I like it to be what was there. So I will probably be going with my East African list that I've gone through. But there we are. Your decisions are the ones that you've got to try and make. Where do you want to go? What do you want to be doing? And it is a fun game, but it's not just got to be fun for you. It's got to be fun for the other person. So they could say, oh yes, I had a great deal of fun using all my heavy howitzers and my hordes of stick-wielding Japanese fanatic infantry, which there wasn't very many, and that was at a very late stage. But we see lists full of them, because you can. And they're very difficult to stop. So, yeah, oh, couple them, because you can, in the rules, take the M3s with the hordes of Japanese stick-wielding infantry. So, yeah, it's a tricky one. And how can this be sorted out in total? Well, there's various options and various views. And one is for Warlord Games to seriously have a look at what they're doing. And I think for me, there seems to be no lack of cohesive thought with regards to the army lists in the books, in the actual army book itself, so like the armies of Germany, and the theatre books, like the Battle of the Bulge and Market Garden, and then the campaign books, so Western Desert, New Guinea, and obviously Market Garden was in the campaign books there. So it's the units that are being put forward. So are they now generic to any list that you can take for that year for any competition? So it takes away like the reinforced platoons, where you would normally have an officer, 2 sections of infantry, and then you can choose between normally 1 tank, whatever. Whereas we're now getting in the campaign books, say if we look at the Western Desert book for the British, if you take 2 platoons, you're going to take a platoon, you could have 2 tanks in it. So if you could work out the points to take 2 platoons, you could have 4 tanks, but they would just be rifle platoons. So tricky. So the Market Garden book, you've got paratroopers which are super stubborn. Take all morale checks on unmodified leadership test. Are they then inclusive into any game? So in a generic list I want to take, could I use them in that? Because they're the units that are in the campaign book. And people aren't really sure on what is and what isn't. And if you have a look on a lot of the oops, that's the camera dropping down. If you have a look on a lot of the social media, these are the questions that people are asking, and they are skewing some of the tournament events and the lists that you can take. So it's a difficult one, and I don't think that the people who are writing the campaign books are necessarily getting the right direction from Warlord powers that be, and they're not really thinking about or looking at how all the games interact. Compare that with Chain of Command. We've only played a couple of games of Chain of Command, but the lists are far more historical, and that's another thing that comes into what is bolt action. Well, it's a game based on World War II. Is it historically correct? I don't know. Probably not, no. Because lots of these units you wouldn't be able to use because they wouldn't be there. Generally. Oh, they might have been there on one day, yes. So that's the justification for running it. However, so we go back to Chain of Command, and it is very much more historically set for your sections, your support units that you can use and choose from. So they have supplements. They have other booklets, campaign booklets, but all those campaign booklets work within the rules. So you know that what you're going to be facing in that particular scenario is likely to be historically more correct. So in that game you could put early wars up against late wars, but it's not really designed because it's aimed to be protagonists at that point in time and in those years. And if you wanted to do late armies, they would be against late armies. The difficulty is that Chain of Command doesn't really, at the moment, lend itself to a tournament event system, which bolt action does. So bolt action is, I can take this list, I can take this points, and we can have a game. And we can. But it could be well one-sided if somebody takes a late German army with lots of Panzerfausts and all different things like that, and you go up against a very early Wars game unit or list, and you're going to struggle because of the change in weaponry. So, which all around brings us back to tournaments. And yeah, you want to get people to turn up, and people will turn up if they can take their toys. And if you stop them taking their toys, they're not going to turn up. So in events like Roll Call, they can take all of their toys. In some of the other local events, like some of the ones we run, you can't. And you're only going to get so many people turn up to it. And you want people to turn up. So, a difficult decision to make. And I think for numbers, people go, yeah, take all your toys. Because it's in the rule book, and you can do it. So, down to TOs to a degree, again, in the end. Warlord has quite a lot of responsibility to make sure that their campaign books and theatre books and rule books gel together so that you can take those units to match in. TOs, tournament organisers, have a duty, I think, of care to their players to let them know before the event is live what they're going to be facing. We come on to Warlord GT. They've had the tickets for sale for a year, and I think we bought them November last year, because we couldn't go last year, but we bought them November, and we couldn't and didn't find out what we could take or what was going to be able to be taken until about 4 weeks before the event. So what time does it give you to build anything that you want to build, any armies and things like that to practice? It doesn't. They've had nearly a year to sort it out, and took that long to do it. And that's not right, because small events can sort things out. Biggish events, they can do it. So I don't know why Warlord couldn't have done it and make that decision. However, they've gone for the route that they have, and we're going this year. Whether we go next year, well, that'll be a different matter. We'll have to see how the games turn out this year. Whether we have fun or whether we didn't. So we'll have to make that decision, because it's quite a big outlay to travel up, stay over in a hotel for 2 nights, all adds in the money and costings, and away from family. So we shall see. So TOs, yeah, responsibility to work out what we're doing. We've got one on Sunday, this just coming up, and that's 2 rifle platoons that you can take, and we've not really stopped people taking lots of different bits in there. So we'll see what comes up and how the games run. As I say, for Shrapnel next year, we'll be looking at probably 1 or 2 rifle platoons, and it'll be early wars. December 41 is your latest date, and we'll look at what units are available and make sure that the vehicles were the vehicles that they took. So if anybody goes for the M3, now you'll be dropping your extra LMGs from the sponsons, because they weren't used, except perhaps the Americans, but that was perhaps 1942. So anyway, we'll allow them to sneak in. The Bastards of Bataan is an interesting little list. I took that once. Lots of inexperienced infantry, so you need a few tanks in there, and they were the M3s. So a bit of a ramble, and a talk about theming lists, what is cheese, what isn't cheese, and nobody knows really. It's just, what it comes down to is what you don't like seeing and what you don't like playing, and possibly because you haven't been told. So yeah, we're off to the Warlord GT. I may well be taking my East African Keren list, with my 1 Matilda and no M3s. So you'll have to wait and see what I do. So who wins? Is it this one on this shoulder, or is it this one on this shoulder? We'll wait and see. Anyway, take care, and thanks for sticking with it and putting up with it. So I hope you liked it, and we'll speak to you and see you soon. Well, thanks for sticking with my ramblings, and the thoughts of Chairman Ken. Anyway, thanks for watching, and if you liked it, give it a thumbs up. Put any comments that you have in the comments, and I'll always answer. And like if you did, share it with your friends, subscribe if you haven't, hit the notification bell, and next video out, I've got no idea. Could be a game, could be a build, could be a paint. Probably won't do any more ramblings. Anyway, take care, and see you soon.